Welcome everybody to part 4 of our remote working issues. It's communication. And communication is actually the last part because it puts everything together. It's a glue getting everything really fixed together. I know we always feel that communication is the most important part and communication is the biggest problem we actually feel we had on remote working, but it is because we didn't take care of the other parts. Now, as we took part of the other parts and all the other issues, it's much easier to talk about communication, because otherwise we would always cycle back to our management problems, technology problems, and about productivity. Now, as we took care of those things, and please feel free to look at the YouTube videos if you missed one of these webinars to get actually the full picture. Now, if we talk about communication, it doesn't matter now in remote work or in general communication. We have to set a baseline on which we can communicate. It's like we need always a communication baseline. As the biggest problem we find in communication is actually the receiver and sender problem. And to fix those things, we have to understand what communication means and how it actually works. So my first question is actually, can you not communicate? And this question is important because the only way, in my experience, how you not be able to communicate is if you're in a bubble and this bubble is not transparent. Of course, right now the bubble should be at least 6 feet wide to have the distance, but it needs to also be not transparent. Then you're safe. You don't communicate. You can communicate with yourself, but nobody outside will communicate with you. As soon as this bubble goes transparent, you already start communicating. Even if you don't say anything, even if you don't do anything, it really depends where your bubble is. If your bubble now is on Main Street, transparent, and you sit in it, you already communicate. And if you look at the picture here, I already communicate to you. The picture tells you something. The picture builds something up. So for some of you, maybe think like cool car or nice environment, but me personally, I don't look at you, but I still communicate. This picture already gives you a certain feeling. You look at the environment and it puts you in a certain condition on which we are communicating. So the question is, can you not communicate? The answer is no, you can't not communicate. I know this double negative gets more and more famous lately, but it's actually the only real reason I found on a double negative. Talking about communication means we have to think about our input channels. And we have several input channels. So we have hearing, smell, taste, touch, and vision. Now, hearing or vision is the most common one. We immediately think that's our communication way, but it's not the only one. Yeah? It's even the smelling. And of course, if you're in a social distance and if you're working from home, we are missing this one. We're missing touch, and also we've missed the taste. Is it quite true? No, because the way how it's communicated, taste is important because very often we have this feeling it leaves a bad taste in our mouths. And that's actually true. It's this feeling we get if you have a miscommunication, if you have bad input. It really leaves this bad taste. On smell, you very often have this expression, I can't really smell this person. In Germany, this expression is really common. But that's a feeling we get. We go into a room and we immediately feel, I don't know. I don't like this person. I can't smell it. I feel insecure. Now, you noticed I was talking a lot about feeling. Because yes, we have those input channels, but we also feel. And the feeling is even more, it is how we are feeling today. Are we secure? Are we in a survival mode? Are we in our comfort zone? And are we enthusiastic? We really want to go forward. We are motivated. everything how we are personally feeling has a big impact about the information we are getting and we're receiving. If I'm in a fear area, if I'm in a fear zone, everything gets communicated to me is actually cut down to only, is it important? Does it help me to come out of this one? Can I survive? If I'm motivated, if I'm in my comfort zone, I take on information differently. I can even get better at criticism. So our personal feeling, the environment we are in, is really, really important. So everything you communicate, you always have to make sure you take all 5 input ways into it, and you build a base that the receiver actually feels safe, feel secure, be motivated. If you do this, you can really communicate much, much easier. Now, that's one part of it, the ways we get information in, but we're also human beings. So we are different people, we are different personalities. And from my background as a sports coach, we like to talk about 4 easy put out personalities. So you have this doer who just jumps immediately on everything he wants to do, try it out and fails. No worry, try it again, try something else. So really not scared about anything. You can throw and communicate much, much easier to someone who doesn't take everything as a threat immediately and goes forward. And you have these feelers who are really certain of what's the environment. Are they safe? What does it mean? Did I say it correctly? Did I communicate correctly? The watcher is the person who sits back and waits what everybody else does. And after a while and feels safe, is coming in. The thinker is the one who rethinks everything. Every word communicated, every word he's saying or wants to say, he's thinking again. And it takes a long time until communication will be established. You're never 100% one of those personalities. It's more a mixture, and depending also in which area. If it's an area you're comfortable with and it's your expertise, you can tend more to the doer, for example. If it's an area where you don't have any expertise, you're changing. But it's this way we have our personality and we have to categorize them. So knowing now how I communicate, how the input, the receiver can take information in, and the personality, we have to work on those one, understanding them, and actually use this knowledge to communicate correctly. Now, starting communication means also, as I said before, having a baseline on which we communicate. And this baseline is actually also guidelines. And it should be always respectful and polite. So that's the most basic communication principle and guideline we should have. Now, besides those other personalities, we have to take in consideration the time, the culture, the age, and the knowledge, the expertise. Because that's also important how we can communicate to someone. And to an older person, the way what is respectful to them is probably completely different to a young one. The way it's communicated, the way it's addressed. Also culture. So if you, for example, send an email to Germany, an email is an official communication. So it needs to be addressed correctly and it has a nice ending. And in between is the content. So writing an email is not a chat for Europeans, and especially not for German. It's an official communication. You can send even a fax or a real letter. It's exactly the same structure. So this culture differently would mean already it's unrespectful if you just set a check note in the email. And you want to make business with Germany, you have to consider those things. So what I like to do is I like to build up a pyramid, and that's a communication guideline. It's respectful, polite, it's meaningful, understandable, reasonable, and focused. So if you're not polite, you can be as focused as you want. The receiver gets into a position where it's uncomfortable. So he won't take this information on how you actually wanted to give it. So always think about this pyramid. of your guidelines. Now, that is the principle, and to actually establish our baseline of communication. If we all stick to those guidelines, if we all remember them, it's much, much easier to communicate. And you will notice sticking to those guidelines makes it also much, much easier to be polite and respectful. The biggest issue we are finding in communication is that it's taken out of context. So to communicate effectively, it needs to be context oriented. Now we have several tools, and we talked about the tools in the first webinar. And if you Google communication tools and how you should communicate, you suddenly come up with orders. And it says like, hey, it's in person. It's the best way to communicate. It's not possible right now. That's why we put video conference into it. Then it goes down to telephone, management tools, and so on. Now, if there are marketing people right now in the webinar, they totally disagree with me. For them, communication is social media. The point is, we didn't have the context. So if I have an important message, the personal or the video call is still the best approach to use, or to call one on a phone before I start writing long texts and emails. If I'm talking about tasks, if I want to be effective, I should use really structured tools to get it done and to structure my task and communicate it and have the update status in it. So I don't have to always write and give an update. It's done all automatically. So putting this on a task-based, you see the direction of tools is changing, or even someone are taken out. If you talk about marketing, of course, social media goes up, email comes up. So the order is changing. And that's important to remember. Communication always needs to be in context. For me, I found 5 important things, and I put them in W's. That's the important thing, how to communicate. You have the who, where, what, and you see the structure. It goes to a why, and then when. And if you always look at those 5 parts, you will communicate effectively and structured. Now, still, before you start communicating to whom, you should really ask yourself some questions. Does the receiver want this? Does the receiver need this information? Do I need a response? Should it be a priority? Is it critical? And if it's critical, for whom? And is there an action to follow on it? Now, if you can't answer those questions, specifically the top one with yes, there's no reason to communicate. Yeah, I know currently being remote, it gets harder and harder to actually find out, does the receiver needs this information? Does he want this information? Normally we have this coffee talk in the morning, lunch break talk in the afternoon on a coffee, we meet in the kitchen area or outside by grabbing lunch, and we start talking about things who seem not to be so important, but it's everything around. Now you tell me about some link you find and I can select, that's interesting. Can you please send it to me? I was like, I don't like it. It's not interesting for me. So this information is already given out and nothing comes to me anymore. Lately, being remote, I get tons of those emails. And to be honest, I have no idea if I want this information or if I need it. And I can't tell you if I need it, because if I get a strange link, out of security reason, I probably won't open it because I'm missing completely the context. So there's a link and this link kind of looks strange to me. So I won't open it because it could be a security issue. And for sure, I can tell you I didn't want this. Now, the rest of the questions, I can't answer you. I definitely can't, because if I don't open it, from the email, I can't tell you if you need a response, if there's an action related, or if I should do something. Now, if this comes from management, probably I have to open it and have to start figuring out to answer those questions. If there's a task following it, if it's important, if I should do something or forward it and do anything. Now, if you look back to productivity, and I say like, if you get information in, prioritize it, make sure that if you can answer it and do it underneath 2 minutes, do it immediately. If not, keep on planning it and make your time estimation and plan it correctly. I can't, because all information is missing. So I can't make any decision if I can do it quickly or not, or when I should do it. So what happened is, and I like to call it, please don't make your problem to my problem. So that's really, really important to whom you send. On top of it, is management included? It's already an escalation. If you include immediately team lead, department heads, top management, VIP level in every information, you put a lot of stress on the receiver to have the feeling I need to do something actively because management was involved. Still, you miss all the information, but you get the stress point to act immediately. So on the other hand, if you always include management and you include external person, the circle is really, really wide and communication starts to go wrong in the wrong direction, because if someone replies, he has everybody in and tons of people get the same information completely taken out of context. So everybody gets something else out of it, and we have to avoid those things.
Norbert?
Yeah.
On productivity and email culture, how do you restructure your workflow and improve work culture if right now the culture is to respond immediately to emails?
This cultural thing is a lot coming from management. If there's an immediate response needed, if you have the feeling you have to respond to emails immediately, one simple trick is don't look at your emails every time. Make certain times when you look at it. So start looking at 11 a.m. the first time. I know that sounds hard, but you can reculture everyone. An email never ever has an immediate response. If you need an immediate response, you can pick up the phone and say, like, I need something immediately, and send an email out, and I send you an email what I need. So if you really have an emergent response, call someone. Make it much, much easier. So email culture, we have to get down that emails taken out of context needs to have a response. But you have to also reculture everyone. If you have this feeling, stop looking at your emails all the time. Do it 2-3 times a day, and you will see suddenly on the other side, on the sender side, the immediate reaction part goes down. And if you notice that someone doesn't really ask a follow-up and there was no action related to this email, they won't ask anything, so there's nothing to do. We had on productivity always this question, is there an action related? If you can't get out of an email any action for you, you don't have to do anything right now. If there's an action, it should say clearly when, what should be done. If not, give yourself some time on it. A good friend of mine, when we had so stress, even with clients and big things come up, he always said, you know what? We quickly do nothing. And then you come down with the stress, and then you see like you can really look into it. But quickly we do nothing is a good answer if you feel stressed that you have to react immediately. It always helped me.
Great. And we have one more question. Do you have any quick tips relating to email culture so that we not only help change our reactive focus, but also the whole organization so that we're all on the same page?
Yes, really almost on the second last page, I will show you a result for that. Quick answer, cut down emails as much as possible. That's if we have less emails, because email tends to be a lot of stress. If you use different communication ways, it makes it much, much easier. Yeah. So just to recap quickly, we have the who, where, what, why, when. So where is the communication part we are talking. Yeah. So we have to figure out who. Now we have to think about where. So where we have those lot of tools, tons of tools. Now we have to make sure that we use for the right communication the right tool. And not often it's email. We tend to use a lot of email, and we tend to use emails as a chat function. And if you start having email as a chat function, you're doing something wrong. You should have a chat system set up. You can work with file system, cloud system, all those different tools. That's the where. If you structure this correctly, and we've discussed it also in tools and solutions, if you structure this correctly, the to whom is very often already solved because of the tool and the where. Communicate what? As I was writing in the blog, I was fortunate to actually train with visual impaired athletes. And I studied, besides physics, sport on prevention rehabilitation level. Means I worked with injured people or handicapped people. And one big thing in skiing and inline skating, instructor and examiner, I worked a lot to go skiing with them. Now, if you say like communicate what, it makes you really, really understanding suddenly how you have to focus on what you communicate. If you ski or skate with a visually impaired person, you have to communicate precisely in the exact moment what they need. Now, imagine I'm skating and there's this huge hole on the street. The first thing you would think like I communicate is there's a hole. Watch out, attention, there's a hole. Now, the problem is this person can't look into my head. Now, to see the hole, to think the environment, all this information I'm having around me right now, does the person I'm communicating to has as well, is a wrong assumption. Now, this makes it really clear if we talk about skating with a visually impaired person. If I say attention hole, this information is nothing. Now, if I communicate with tasks, with certain things I want to do, with emails, and I have two monitors up and I have all the browsers open, have different information and documents, and I have all this information with me, and now I'm sending out one line, I need this because I see it on my monitor, or a useful link. All this information I am having is missing, but the receiver can't look into my head. So taking this example again, the right communication would have been full stop, sharp right, or jump, or make a scissor on skating, which actually gets you over the hole, which is a specific technique. So learning what to communicate in the precise manner and knowing which content the receiver has and the context and the environment is really, really to understand what you communicate. So if you communicate what, make sure the context is clear. Never assume someone can open remotely your brain and look into it. So this makes really important to make the circumstances the receiver is in. Even the feelings, the situation, means the mood. Be aware of the mood, yeah? And be as clear and precise as possible. And top of it, and that answers the question we had before, make sure your expectations are clear. If I get information, I would expect if you need an action, if you have a deadline, if it has a priority, it's in it. Your expectations, while you communicate to me, are set clearly. So communicate in a remote work makes it much, much harder because you just can't go over and say like, hey, I need this. So priorities are addressing versions which are obsolete. Sometimes we have too many versions, problem also from emails, getting the same document 10 times. I have no idea which versions anymore. So we have to make sure what is obsolete and what is correct information, categorize the information, and refer to helpful links. So you see, the what gets really important to structure. Now, if you look back, if you think back about the structure, we're talking what, why. So the why is actually the motivation part. Why it's important for me, why we need to do it. So if you miss this why, and we tend to miss the why, we miss the environment we are talking about. We are missing the whole picture. So what you have to give the why, and more often you have the why, the picture is there, the big picture is there, and the receiver understands my motivation. So if I have a priority, for the receiver, it might be, yeah, you said priority 1, but I don't get it. I think it's a different priority, to be honest. So it falls down. Or the receiver doesn't want to do it because it's an uncomfortable task. But understanding the why it's important for the corporation right now, why it is important for me, it helps to motivate to get this extra meters, to get the extra mile. And with the why, we have this common ground of communication. Now, communicate when. Biggest part, be aware of time zones. Yeah. We talked about productivity and in management, different work rhythms. So the good thing with remote working is really that we can have different rhythms of working. But we need to know when we send information. I use this example. I want to get my work done. I'm getting up early. I'm an early bird, so I start writing emails or tasks out at 5. Everybody else getting up, not even having the first coffee, the inbox is already full and a lot of stuff coming in. So that's not really helpful in a communication when I do communicate. Taking the time zones again in consideration, I might have limitations on this one. So I have to understand, I'm in the same time zone. Can I communicate correctly? Can I give someone a free time? Did someone say like, hey, I have this afternoon off and I'm leaving the office and I say like, I have the afternoon off. And what happens to me, I get immediately an email afterwards like, hey, can you look at this? No, I have the afternoon off. So this when, send it next day when I'm back. So, you know, this way to communicate helps also if you move your information a little bit in your time zone, you can set the expectation correctly. But if someone tells you, I'm leaving now the office, and you send behind him an email immediately, or throw another task in the system in it, I don't know if it's really polite and if it puts the other one in stress because he thinks like, oh, feels bad because he has an afternoon off and now all the information coming in. So you see, putting this in context again, the when is really important. Time zones. I was working a lot with different time zones. So I had a full development team, first in Quebec City, then here in New Brunswick. Quebec City, 6 hours different to Germany. That means if we start working in Canada, it's already really late in Germany. So also one good thing here in New Brunswick, people tend to go earlier to work. In Quebec, they tend to go late. Now, going late to work in Quebec City and 6 hours difference, until if they are ready to work at 10, it's already 4 p.m. in Germany. So if you can have your first meeting at 10 a.m. in Canada, it's 4 p.m. in Germany. So what happens is you have on the other side a team which is fresh and just started and had his coffee and full of energy, and you have those, their days is done and they're already tired. And now you have to streamline this communication that it still works. Now, if they have something they need in Germany and have to communicate it over, and they are tired, they have to make sure that this communication gets really sufficient, streamlined, structured over. There's not a lot of time anymore for fun and social communication. You want to go home, you want to just communicate this information. That can quickly turn around to look unpolite for the Canadian team. So you have to make this awareness clear, and you have to make sure which time you are really communicating. The good thing is with the time zones, I would expect an answer for my question early in the morning. So the job is done and I can get up and see an email, it's done, you can deliver it to the client, which is a good thing. So it's nothing bad about having different time zones. It's actually good for business, but it makes it really hard for communication. And you see 2 clocks there. I actually put in every office 2 clocks. German time, Canadian time. For some reason, this time zone concept, while you're working, while you're on it, it's just not in your mind. You just think like, hey, I can call quickly Germany or I can call Canada. No, it's early in the morning or it's too late. So trying to call me, suddenly it's midnight in Germany, wouldn't really help. Yeah. So for some reason that never worked, and I put physical clocks up to show them what time it is in Germany or what time it's Canada. I know that was a lot of information, everything around how we communicate, what is important to understand. And probably now you ask, but how do I really make this sufficient and easy? Yes, we talked about the 5 points, the 5 W's. Yeah. And to be honest, it is really simple. I'm using always a cloud-based system. And the whole communication I'm doing with my teams goes over this system. So now you see there's a folder and there's a document in it. The folder is called To Do, and it's an incoming mail. So if I early in the morning go in, I see new documents arrived, it's in the folder To Do. So the context is already somehow there. And the who, all the people have access to this folder. It's already set, I don't have to think about it. We saw it before, who needs to have the access to the To Do folder. And then I can grab the information important for me. Where is, of course, the cloud. The priority is set. We put the priority in the name of the document. So the document came in somewhere via email or other system scanned. And the thing we are doing is not using this funny name the scanner produces and just throw it somewhere out of context. We rename it priority 2. What? It describes it. It describes it, what is in the document. The why is put on a comment. So everything we need is there by just renaming the document correctly and throw it in the correct folder, in a good folder structure. Where the access to this folder structure is not for everybody, it's limited to those team members who have to work with it. So pretty simple, by just renaming, having a naming convention, you can do easy all those tasks. And now I can look at it with the why. I know, yeah, would be interesting to fill this formula out. I have a deadline, June, so I can plan. I know immediately it probably takes me more than 2 minutes to fill it out. So I can just make a plan in the system, book me a time in my calendar. So like I'm needing 3 hours to fill it out and book it and link it to it. So I have every information within one nice renamed document. We are talking about a chat system. Don't use the email as a chat, use a chat system. Now, that's what we are using here. You have the content already set by different chat rooms. the why, the context, everything is already around it. The priority you can set in the chat, the what, that's where you're talking, and the who is done by all those participants you invite to this specific chat. So you have a context you want to communicate on, you have a new room. Don't mix things up. Don't put everything in one chat, general, and everything goes into there. It's not an effort to make a new chat room and to invite the right people to it. And you see something, useful links. So there you can throw everything in there. You have no idea what to do with, but you just want to keep it. Structuring something like this makes it really, really easy to communicate. Now, if I get a new chat, a new request, it pops up and it tells me, and then I see in which context it is by just going to the right chat room. Then, yes, we discussed this email. Exactly the same thing. Structure your subject. If you write an email, make sure to whom you're writing it, who wants and who needs this information. Don't make the circle really wide and pre-think, can I do it already on a different system? Is it actually something I could do in our project chat rooms, or I can communicate just by putting a file on the system, different ways? Well, if you have to send an email, think about your subject, how you name your subject, because that's the most important thing. That comes up on your phone. If you look at it, that's what you see. So here it says for your information. Yes, to whom and why? It's a category, sustainability, because I'm interested in it. So I want to have this information. If you have a useful link for me about sustainability, yes, I want to have it because I'm interested in it. So to whom is clear, I want this is clear, and the why, because I'm interested in it. The where is clear, the email. Now we have for your information, sustainability, and new rules, and a deadline set. When those new rules are actually applied. So the sender looked at the information, and by looking at the information, sending the link, he was on his own going through the link, seeing that could be really important for Norbert. And there's a deadline with it. And that's why I put all this information already in the subject and it's sent out. Now, if you just have a link and you didn't open this link and just someone else gave this link and you think like that could be useful for some other people too without reading it, that's spam. If you didn't read the content you're referring to, it's pure spam by definition. So you shouldn't send this email. That's just to make a recap. We had now 4 parts of this webinar. And we started with technology. So optimize the tools used and be then consistent in the usage. If the team, the corporation decided we are having now chat for most of the communication, task-oriented, all those things, be consistent. Stop sending emails to it. If you're using a file system to put all documents in it and you have agreed on a naming convention, use it. Think about security all the time. Manage solution-oriented, manage transparent, and manage with trust. Especially on remote working, we have to trust each other that we are doing the job. By trusting each other, we can actually cut down a lot of overhead and a lot of not needed communication because we trust each other. On productivity, structure your day. Stay on the active side, not on the reacting part. And review your to-do list on a regular basis. Communication, communicate respectful with context and structured. And by the last example, we saw how easy it is to actually structure communication. And of course, you have to adapt it to your corporation. You have to adapt it to your team and find a naming convention. Yeah, it doesn't help if everybody now has his own naming convention. So yes, you have to sit together and agree on a naming convention you're using, and then stick to it. And you will see it makes it much, much easier. It's a good thing if you're using tools, if you're using to put the document in there. You can skip all this email, all the stuff you have to write, to not just send a chat and here's a new document, because the communication itself is structured and respectful because we agreed on this naming convention. But by not needing to write always this context around it and this plural around it to stay polite and respectful, it's much, much easier and we communicate faster. Now open for questions.
On your last blog, Norbert, you wrote, communication can be easy if we as the sender take on the responsibility of building trust with the receiver. The more they fully trust that we will give them the correct and precise information at the right time, in the right context and as needed, the better all communication flows will become. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this responsibility?
Yes. So we have two things. Very often, a sender of information just wants to get it out. So like, I have this information, I just have the feeling I have to share it, and I just give it out. And the receiver doesn't need it and doesn't want it. So it's actually, no matter if we talk spam, we always talk about email. But no, it's all information we are giving out, everything we communicate. And if I don't want it, it's spam. So if you communicate because you just want to get rid of the information, you know, I have this expression, like, if you have this feeling, I can give you a quarter and you just take a parking slot and you throw it in and tell it to the parking slot. Maybe it's more interested than me. Sounds a little bit rude, but if you imagine it, if you want to be respectful for the sender, you have to ask yourself, does the sender want this information? Does he need it? Now, putting it from sport perspective and working with those athletes, talking about why we're going the slope down skiing, talking about the sun, talking about other people and what they wear, and all those nice social talk around, wouldn't be really respectful because he doesn't need it right now. He needs to know exact information about the slope, about the snow condition, the texture of the snow. So I have to be really precise what I communicate at what time to keep my companion safe. With also give him the time and the possibility to enjoy it. If I over communicate, if I'm talking the whole time, he will never be able to enjoy his own rhythm, enjoy his own hearing the snow, hearing the environment on its own. So I have to be less on as much communication as it's needed, not to over communicate. But the question is always, if you want to be respectful, you have to put yourself in the position of the sender. If I would be the sender, would I like it? So don't do anything to someone you don't want.
Okay, great. About over communicating, how do you approach which pieces of information to disclose and to not disclose so that you reach the balance between transparency and not over communicating?
I'll try to have still social communication, like this coffee talk. I like to use this coffee talk because I drink a lot of coffee. So if we stay in the kitchen, we start talking about everything. Everything was happening yesterday's around politics, whatever. And then suddenly you notice which direction this communication takes, and you feel what the other person is interested into it. Now, I can see if some information I want to get out, they're interested, or it's already too much for them. And on a technical level, if we're going on task level, I try to be as minimized as possible by correct structure and keeping the context really to the point what it is. So taking all the social parts of this communication out and keep it on the side and be really focused on the task, like a technical task. So over communicating also means, and I know a lot of people tend to do this with emails, you have one email And in this email, you have 5 different things. So it doesn't help if you have one subject, and then you have 5 different points in this email. Or you have this chat room and you talk about everything in this. So in this email, you over-communicated already because the context is not anymore fitting to the subject. So if you have 5 things to address and they're important and you need to make priorities, you would have probably to send 5 different messages, structuring the subject correct. And by doing it, you start that it's like, maybe I don't need to send this, maybe it's too much, yeah? And suddenly you start thinking. But if you put everything in one thing and it's just out, you make your problem to the other person's problem, and you should avoid this.
Great. You'll enjoy this next question. What is a polite way to get management to see your webinar, and more importantly, your series of webinars?
That's a good question. Okay, it's the only way how you, if you, and my whole life was in management, yeah? So management has a different agenda. So they're focus driven on what is the revenue, what we have to report to the board members. So there are different aspects, what is important for them. So if you want them to look at some information you think it's impossible, and by this get some information out which might change some behavior, you have to address why it's important to look at it, what it helped you. If you say that helped really, and we should give it to every new one, and we look in the whole team, we should discuss it. Because for me personally, it was really helpful. I feel more productive. I can work better now if I address those things. So why you not look at it? So you find a nice way to communicate it politely, that it would be important because it's important for the team. And if it's for the team important, management tend to look at those things. But they need a reason, and this reason is reporting to board members. Can I save money? Can I make more money? All those things. So again, to whom you're communicating, what is in for them.
Cool. Our next question is, sometimes someone else sends a question or information by email, and they send it without context. As a result, the recipient may need to do additional problem solving or thinking to identify the context, to be able to appropriately answer the question or identify next steps. This can result in time wasted for the recipient. How should the recipient minimize these situations and manage this?
If you get like a message totally taken out of context, you could respond and say like, I'm sorry, I have no idea what I should do with this information. Can you be please more clear what you expect from me? So a good method is you ask back an open question. You're not setting like the point is like, this information is useless, you're wasting my time. Then it escalates in a few different directions, yeah? So if you ask an open question back and they're like, thanks for the link, I'm honestly have no idea what I should do, and could you be more clear why it is useful and in which context it is useful and what you expect from me as a next task? By asking this question, the sender before has to now rethink what they do, because an open question implicates he has to respond now. And if you don't get any response, you know it wasn't important. If you get a response, you get context in it. But those little things, those emails taken out of context, those chats taken out of context, whatever, doesn't help, because the person who sends it first did in a specific mood, in a specific environment, look at it and get completely different context out of it. The receiver has a different mood, and so the context can be completely different. So without setting any what the sender wants to have, to set really deadlines, expectation, all those things, you never be able to know what you want to do and in which perspective you have to put the context you're reading. Asking back an open question will solve this problem. And of course, it puts an interaction into it, and it will change culture, because if you ask open questions, and if you don't understand it, don't be afraid that someone thinks like, he never know what to do. I send a link and it should be clear what to do. No, just a link is never clear what to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that wraps up our webinar part 4 and our webinar series. If you didn't see part 1, 2, or 3, they're already live on YouTube. But other than that, it has been an absolute pleasure, Norbert. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and to those who have joined us the whole journey from part 1 to part 4. It's been great. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.